Good evening and a very warm welcome to First Issues. We trust that all our viewers are safe and sound after the International Workers' Day or Labor Day long weekend. In light of the just ended holiday, we thought it fitting to discuss a topic that discusses workers' welfare, taking into account that the 1st of May is the perfect time to contemplate the gains made in institutionalizing and protecting workers' rights and welfare since the 1886 protests for an 8-hour workday that the day initially marked. The Insurance Institute of Botswana's Workers' Compensation Insurance Forum that took place last Wednesday at the Travel Lodge Conference Hall here in Gaborone presented the perfect platform for us to honor and discuss workers' welfare this evening. It gave us access to a host of stakeholders that work together to ensure that employees' rights are respected in the event that they are harmed on the job. The law of Botswana, as is articulated in the Workers' Compensation Act, deems it only fair that a worker be compensated if they fall ill, become injured, or even die as a result of their working environment. This means that everyone, from nurses working with potentially contagious diseases, farmhands with unpredictable animals, engineers with heavy-duty equipment, to cleaners with toxic chemicals, should trust that the hazards that they encounter on a day-to-day basis are not only counted by safety standards, but that in the event of the worst-case scenario, the laws of this country mean that they will be shielded from future inability to work, lost work days, and other physical and mental impairments that may arise. Setting the scene for our discussion, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Employment, Labour, Productivity and Skills Development, Pearl Ramokoka, tells us what the most recent developments in workers' compensation in Botswana have been.
As recent as October 2016, government decided to move the function of workers' compensation to occupational health and safety, as it was earlier on placed under Commission of Labour. The reason why the compensation was placed under the occupational health and safety was because of the relatedness, so that the two can be coordinated adequately and together. Because when they were separated, that uncoordinated effort was causing problems in terms of compensation in the whole process. The Office of the Commissioner of Labour determines how much has to be compensated to an injured employee and then communicates with the employer. The employer communicates with the insurance company, and the Compensation Commissioner's Office monitors whether compensation is being issued to the injured employee.
We take it's a harmonious relationship thus far?
There can only be arguments or disagreements where the insurance company contests the sum that has been issued or just delays issuing the payment.
What developments would you like to see in this space as the ministry? Or what can we anticipate?
As a minister, we really want to see insurance companies being proactive in terms of paying those that are injured at the quickest possible time, because there's a gap in the law in terms of determining the time that the claimant has to be paid. And sometimes it takes years and years because of the protracted arguments about the claim that has been issued by government. And we hope to improve on this relationship so that those that are injured can be paid on time.
Other than that, you are satisfied that Botswana are well protected in terms of workplace compensation?
Though insuring employees is compulsory, there are some employers who just neglect insuring their companies, their employees, and on the other hand, don't provide for a fund where they can actually compensate their employees in terms of injuries. And we are working with Business Botswana and different employers to ensure that they make this cover available for employees.
Welcome back to First Issues. As to commemorate International Workers' Day or the Labor Day holiday observed yesterday, we discuss workplace compensation. What does the insurance fraternity have to say about these delays in payouts of compensation that the Permanent Secretary referred to? Joining the conversation to share their views is the chairman of the Botswana Short-Term Insurance Underwriters Association, Martin Wright.
We've in fact been discussing very recently with the Department of Labour and particularly the Commissioner of Workers' Compensation about this very issue, and there have been various interpretational issues which we are addressing, and the Department of Labour accept that they themselves could be equally responsible for some of the delays, but we have promised that we will look into each individual claim and we will settle them as quickly as we possibly can. When we've had these exercises in the past, we find that many of the claims that they refer to us have in fact already been paid, but we haven't informed the Labour Office, so it's still outstanding from their point of view. And there are also issues over straightforward injury claims. If it's a damaged finger or somebody's cut their arm, that's relatively straightforward. But where there is industrial illness or it's a noise-induced hearing loss, there are certain issues which are open to interpretation, and we may need some legal advice before we can resolve them.
That was government's major concerns with regards to workers' compensation. But as a member of the insurance fraternity, what would you say are your concerns and challenges with regards to this issue?
There are always issues relating to the perceived delays over the claims made to the affected employees, and that at the end of the day is the main issue for workers' compensation. And we have been pleased to hear that the Ministry are in the process of amending or revising or reviewing the Workers' Compensation Payment Act or however. And we've made certain recommendations that we feel maybe that there are different alternatives to having a compulsory insurance for the private sector. In other territories such as Namibia, South Africa and Zimbabwe, the government have what is called a workers' compensation fund, which is not subject to compulsory insurance. And we feel that that may be in fact a better route for the government to adopt, so that there is not the lengthy delay of having to refer it to an insurance company from the employer. At the moment, the process is very long and drawn out. And if an employer doesn't report on time, then obviously that adds to the delay. And then we have to make certain inquiries, we have to have medical examinations undertaken. We may want a second opinion because we are the private sector and we are paying ourselves rather than the government paying out. So we feel that there's possibly, we've discussed it with the government and we've discussed it amongst ourselves as insurers, and we feel that possibly this is one area where the government could improve the overall payment settlement period of time if the whole system was changed.
Where would that leave you as insurance if government was to take over the function?
We have done some exercises and found that in fact the overall premium income for the entire market as far as workers' compensation is concerned is no more than 3.5% of the total premiums. I think one of the speakers mentioned that it's 35 million pula out of a total of 1.27 billion being the income of the industry. So it's not going to have a dramatic effect on our premium income levels. And whilst I've mentioned that some of the accident claims are relatively simple to settle, it's becoming increasingly difficult now and increasingly political with noise-induced hearing losses and with industrial diseases claims. So we feel that in fact it's not going to get any easier, and that possibly for the small amount of premium involved it could be a useful exercise to pass the exercise over to the government, but we have promised that we will participate in any discussions and afford any assistance that we can, and with the experience that we've been able to acquire over the last 30, 40 years of the industry being in force.
So what's the worst case scenario here, that insurers could view workers' compensation as not worth the effort and leave a gap if government is not prepared to fund workers' compensation?
I don't think it would ever get to that stage. We are just making a recommendation and helping the government to move forward. If they have these issues over the long delays, some of which quite rightly, as they've indicated, go back years, which is totally unacceptable, I agree, that maybe the answer is to review the situation as is utilised in South Africa, Zimbabwe and Namibia, where they don't have the same problems with having to do with the insurance companies. There's a general perception that the insurance companies deliberately withhold payment of claims for various reasons, and I want to assure everybody that that is not the case. And that there are various issues that we do discuss with the government, and we ask for information from the government which may take them several months to respond to us. Now, quite clearly, if we didn't have that process, then they could just jump from one step to the next.
The insurance industry currently plays a very important role in terms of workplace compensation. An employer may find themselves having to pay out hundreds of thousands or even millions of pula to an incapacitated employee, although the Workers' Compensation Act only pays out a maximum of 200,000 pula. Without other forms of cover, a business could therefore find themselves in serious trouble. Helen Kizito elaborates.
The Workers' Compensation Act, like we said, is a statutory obligation on the employer to compensate an employee or worker who gets injured in the course of their employment. Okay. In addition to such, we have other forms of compensation. Like I said, it's statutory and it has statutory limits. Other forms of compensation we can talk about is the group personal accident. The group personal accident is a 24-hour cover, and basically it tops up what is not covered by the workers' compensation. The workers' compensation limit is 200,000 pula as a death benefit or as a benefit for permanent disability. So if anyone, and like I said, compensation is based on the earnings of the person. So what will happen is if somebody's earnings are over and above the 200,000 pula limit, another form of compensation will have to fall in. That's the GPA, which will be used as a top-up for that. Unfortunately here, we don't have other forms of cover like disability, rehabilitation kinds of insurances, but those are some of the things that can be used to augment any amount of compensation that can be given to an employee. Because ultimately, when an employer or worker is injured, they'll have to face the prospect of not being employable up to the end of their lives. So how do you cater for something like that? Basically, what you have to do, other countries like the US, they have a disability. You will get your compensation, and in addition, you'll get a disability benefit. And then there's also, like in the UA, what is known as insurance for rehabilitation, where they now want to rehabilitate the person. The only kind of form of such compensation is under MVA. The Motor Vehicle Accident Fund will only pay for injuries and damages, but one of its main objectives is also to make sure that it rehabilitates the injured person. So those are some of the covers you can look at, and those are some of the covers that can help the employee who is injured at a workplace.
Who should seek out this extra cover? Is it the employee or the employer? What would incentivize an employer to maybe even pay more in terms of workers' compensation insurance?
In England, it was based on the good hearts or the noble's fundamental obligation to the employee, because you have to provide a safe and good working environment. Now it also depends on the kind of benefits, because if you only have WCA and then labor calculates that this guy's compensation is supposed to be over 200, somebody somewhere will have to pay the difference. So it's to your advantage that you take out additional covers that will cover you. And another thing that we talked about is the issue of liability. If this guy, the worker who is injured, can go to court and get an award of 1 million pula, if you don't have any other forms, already compensation to the employee is a debt due from the employer. Okay? So now if he gets an award which stipulates more than 200,000, it will be a debt due to you. So you'll have to find the money somehow, either out of your own pocket or out of other insurances.
Thank you for staying with us as in observance of yesterday's May Day, Labor Day or International Workers' Day, whatever you may call it, we discuss workplace compensation. Along with the insurance providers and the policymakers working to make sure that employees get their just dues in the event of illness, disability or death on the job, are doctors, who happen to be the second line of defense after health and safety officers in the workplace.
If you are to look at the healthcare professionals, they must know how to grade the impairment and disability, because the Act has actually provided a guide for that. Yes, there are certain parts which need some review because they are not clear on how to grade the disability and the injuries, but there is that section which provides a minimum guide, for the healthcare professionals to be able to do the rating.
What other observations have you made regarding the processing of workers' compensation claims, the cases that you come across?
Well, you see, the issues with workers' compensation actually arise from the delays that occur. And these delays, you remember, there are so many parties involved. First, there is an employer, there is employee, there is insurance, there is assessment, there is labor department. So it's a long process. And being a long process, it's important to make sure that we remove any obstacles that could actually delay review of these cases and assessment of these cases, so that the cases can actually be settled well without any delay.
We have celebrated the measures in place that contribute towards creating a decent work environments in honor of yesterday's Labor Day holiday that we all enjoyed. But we are very aware that there are those who would seek to exploit these very noble efforts to protect the worker. Bongani Milton of Milton Forensics gave us an eye-opening account of workers' compensation claims fraud.
There's a lot which is happening around that area. Yes, of course, there are lots of claims out there which are genuine, and there are some of them which not so much genuine. So that's why people like me come into the picture, to try and make sure that the insurance at the end of the day, they pay legitimate claim. So in some of the claims, you'll find that things like, because there are certain requirements you have to submit to the insurance. You have to submit maybe pay slips, because they use a certain formula to come to a conclusion to say this person is going to claim this much. Then you have to submit a pay slip, you have to submit all doctors' recommendations and documents from Labor Department. So people go to some of the people, they go to an extent of falsifying the pay slips, go to an extent of falsifying the percentage allocated by the doctor. Let me explain. Let's say person A earns 1,000 pula. Obviously, 1,000 pula, if you're going to multiply, but that formula is going to give him maybe a lower amount. That person can maybe produce a pay slip as if he's earning 10,000 pula. Put a zero that side, and that one extra zero will make a very big difference.
Very much.
let's take, for instance, the doctor allocated maybe 5%. People going to a send of writing 2 on the other side to make it 25%. All right. So that's the other part of it. Sometimes people even go to an extent of maybe conniving with certain medical practitioners. Conniving in the sense that, let's say somebody have got a bruises on the, yes, the loss occurred genuinely, but then the level of injury is not as he says it.
It's exaggerated.
It's exaggerated, let me say. Maybe it was just a bruise. Then they will connive with the whatever, maybe a doctor, I'm sorry to say that. Then they will write as if it is a complete amputation of the arm or so. All right? Then it will be given for me to maybe to investigate. When I go there, only to find that this person is just a bruise, the hand is still intact, everything is okay. So that constitutes a fraudulent claim. Yes. So there are a lot of examples. The list is endless. So we see a lot of things along. So sometimes we'll find that there will be a query from a labor department to say the claim is taking a long time. So that's the reason why maybe we say no, we are still doing some internal things. So those are the things will be still taken care of, so that we establish the legitimacy of the claim. Yes, ma'am.
Having given us a multifaceted appreciation of the status of workers' compensation structures in Botswana, our guests now tell us what they would like to see happen in this area going forward.
The existing Act is far too cumbersome as far as reporting is concerned, and the processes and the procedures necessary for us to be able to settle. At the end of the day, the workers' compensation is here for the benefit of the injured employee. And at the moment, I readily accept, as does the whole market, that some of the delays are unacceptable, and that, as has been discussed at various of the speakers, that the injured employee doesn't understand all the processes involved and get very impatient when they've been told that they're going to receive certain amounts of compensation, and it takes them months and months to get it. So in my view, the first prize would be for the government to really seriously think hard about taking the fund route.
I think like any other law, it should go under review. It should go under review because if you look at certain parts, they contribute to some delays, they contribute to probably poor assessment and all the like.
The Workers' Compensation Act is, like I said, it has a limit. So I think given this day and age, some of the limits, monetary limits, may not be viable for some of the employees.
That concludes our discussion on workers' compensation. We look forward to hearing your contributions on this issue via social media or SMS. With that, it's good night from me, Namitso Samakula, and the First Issues team.